Well, hello and welcome back to the Cinema of Transformation. This week's movie is Rocky from 1976, and it's a classic underdog tale where Rocky is this unknown, unproven boxer, and he gets a shot at the heavyweight boxing title. And through this underdog element, we find out that there is much more to this person and some of the other characters. And throughout the story, this unrealized potential gets brought to the surface, gets challenged, and then it also gets incorporated to where the characters, namely Rocky, can become more than he was when he started, more than his former self. And we're going to focus a lot on the inner story. Now, this seems like an outer story with boxing, and that element is certainly there for the storyline. But all throughout, this is really Rocky's story and some of his inner struggles. And we'll take a look at that and see how his inner story and the inner goal, his inner needs, are related to what's going on in his outside life. And sometimes they're very conflicting, but they end up coming together and becoming one. So we're going to track the inner story and see how it relates to the outer story. And since this is an inner story, it's really Rocky versus himself. And it's a classic. There's a lot of conflicts in the world. Some of the classic ones for literature and drama are man against the world, man against man, any kind of war or anything movie. Man against God, man against nature. These are these main themes. But this is really man against himself. And we'll see that he is not only boxing a champion in the ring, he is also boxing himself in his head and in his heart. Brings a new term to the, or new meaning to the term shadow boxing. So he's boxing his shadow, and we're going to go further into that. But first of all, the movie itself, 1976. Like I mentioned, this is probably not a boxing movie. It's got boxing all over it. There's a boxing match at the beginning and at the end. But all throughout, it's Rocky wrestling with his situation, his background, his environment, himself, his doubts, his fears, and he's boxing some of his gifts too. A lot of the things that, we find that are elusive or have gotten away from us are actually things that are still inside us, and they need to be brought out. So we're going to see a little bit more about how this is not really a boxing movie. Okay, it won Best Picture, Director and Editing in 1976 for the Academy Awards, but not the screenplay. But Sylvester Stallone did write the screenplay. And he had a hard time getting it made. It almost didn't get made. He was an actor. He had starred in the movie Serpico. But he really wasn't getting too far with his career, at least not as far as he wanted to go. He has kind of a speech slur, so maybe that made casting difficult. But he wrote this screenplay, and he really believed in it. And maybe in some way, the screenplay and the character Rocky paralleled with Stallone's underdog status and how he worked so hard to get to a place where he could prove himself. There's a lot of legends surrounding that he had 35 rejections from the studios. Some urban legend is that he actually tied the script to a rock and threw it through a producer's window to get him to read it. I don't know if that's true, but even if it's not true, it's worth repeating. And when people did start getting interested in the screenplay, Stallone said, yeah, but I'm playing Rocky. That was one of his sticking points with selling the screenplay, and he got laughed at. It's like, are you kidding me? You? Heavyweight champion? This guy's like 5'4". But through the magic of movie, and he's definitely muscle bound, he was really able to convince everybody that he was the guy for this part. And not surprisingly, he probably wrote himself in, I'm sure he did, for this part. So it was really Stallone's intuition and his determination that helped get this movie made. And it came out around the time of the 1976 bicentennial era. There was a lot of, pro-America, American history, a lot of patriotism and hoopla, Americana surrounding the whole series of events that took place. And this movie capitalizes on that. It takes place in Philadelphia, and freedom, brotherly love, this land of opportunity. All these themes get played out in the movie Rocky. And we know we've talked about a lot about the hero's journey. And, the first movie we saw, Star Wars, definitely had an epic journey all through space and the other side of the galaxy. Whereas Pretty Woman just really went across town, but it is quite a journey from the seedy Hollywood neighborhood that Vivian was from and the downtown Beverly Hills. Only a few miles away, but kind of a world apart. This one takes place all within walking distance of Rocky's apartment, even the arena where the big boxing match is held. So either a walk or a run, because he does some training. So the scope is really small, even physically, geographically. In fact, the geography plays a part in the movie. It's his environment, Rocky's immediate surroundings that are also in somewhat of a character, or at least they play a part in the development of his character. So it is an epic journey. He doesn't really go anywhere far, but the depths and the lengths to which he goes inside are outstanding. So we're going to track this epic journey, and we are following Rocky. He's the hero of the story, definitely the title character. He's a gritty boxer. He calls himself being from the neighborhood. He's probably from the other side of the tracks. And he probably had a time in which he could have been somebody. Maybe when he was a little bit younger, he had more potential, but that time seems to have passed by the time we get to meet Rocky. He's not getting the boxing matches he would like. He's a little bit jaded, a little bit worn down. He's lonely. He's got this tough outside. But we can tell, and it even gets spoken, that he has heart. Rocky, you got heart, is what Mickey tells him. And that is part of his complexity, but it's also his saving grace. It seems like there's a conflict. How can you be this tough boxer from the neighborhood, and then you've got this tender heart? But he does, and that ends up working to his advantage. And he is not your normal hero. He's kind of not really an anti-hero, but he's definitely an unlikely hero. He lives and works outside of society. His day job is working for a bookie, a loan shark, and he breaks people's thumbs who don't pay up on their bills and pay back the loans. So, he's working for gangsters and lives in this he smokes cigarettes, not really a likely thing for a boxer to do. But there's a humility to him, and he's meek. He's just a guy. I mean, he doesn't really have too much of an overblown attitude or ego. As a matter of fact, it's probably underdeveloped. And that's what we'll get to as we see his story and his larger self unfold. And it's this inner story that he's most concerned with, because that's where he is. He's in the middle of it. He's in the inner city, and this is his inner story. And one of the things that gets brought up a lot is whether or not he's a bum. If he is somebody that can do something, that can be somebody, or is he just another guy from the neighborhood that really didn't turn out to be much? And that's what this story becomes. It becomes his struggle, his fight, to see if he can go the distance, not just with Apollo in the ring, but go the distance in his life and find out what and who he is. And backing up, we can see this from the original movie poster. You can see at the top, the subtitle, it says his whole life was 1,000,000-to-1 shot. Now we know the shot that he gets with Apollo, this unknown boxer gets a shot at the heavyweight title with the champ. That's definitely 1,000,000-to-1 shot. Not only to get the shot, but actually to succeed in that. But they don't talk about that. That's not what this tagline says. It says his whole life was 1,000,000-to-1 shot. And that's what we're dealing with. Does he have a chance? Can he go the distance? And it's through this story, or the struggle, the fight with Apollo, that he's really fighting himself. Okay, and with this we have the lover, and this is Adrian. Yo, Adrian. And she works at a pet store right across from the boxing ring where he works out. She's very meek, very quiet, very shy, very secluded. Not really open too much at the beginning to Rocky's advances. He's trying to get her to go out with him and he doesn't really seem to get too far until he talks to his friend Pauley, who happens to be the brother of Adrian, and things start moving forward there. Now, she is tender on the outside, but also has a tough inside, a little bit opposite of Rocky. And we see this. This gets brought out from her. So she has really an incredible transformation, almost as much as Rocky has, in her way. So they help each other, and it's through each other that they can become more than what they thought they were at the beginning. And this unrealized potential, or diamond in the rough, is what we're talking about. And how can you uncover that? How can you become this greater thing that you really are? And like we will see and have seen already with the lover in these movies, it's, yes, a physical lover. It's a person. But it's also, the lover is also representative of what is beautiful, what is good, what is loving, what is caring, what is nurturing, what is sweet in a harsh, unloving world. And that is one of the main roles that Adrian plays, both for herself and definitely for Rocky. So this is the lover, Adrian. And we have the mentor, Mickey, and a great character, Burgess Meredith, great role, a fantastic performance. And he's Rocky's trainer. He owns the gym where Rocky works out. And he's not a fun, soft, cuddly guy. He's pretty harsh and tells you how it is, and kind of one of those guys that knocks you down to make you tough. Or at least that's what they think they're doing by knocking you down. So, and he's got his own past. He was a boxer himself, and he didn't live up to his potential, which is probably why he's projecting that onto Rocky. And if through Rocky, making Rocky a better boxer, then maybe that somehow absolves or brings together and heals his past. And one of the things he talks about Rocky having, not his boxing skill, that's part of it, but he also says, but you've got heart, Rocky, you've got heart. And we know this. We know he has an actual loving heart, but that heart, that courage of heart, that dedication, I know we've all seen maybe we've seen the movie Rudy. That's all heart. The guy wasn't a big football player. He wasn't big. Probably shouldn't have been a football player, but boy, he had heart. And that's what helped Rudy, get to be, what he got to be. So again, Mickey's critical of Rocky, but I think that's something that maybe 50 or 60 years ago was even a parenting thing, that if you're harsh and cruel to not cruel, but if you're harsh and critical to your children, that's a way of making them tough. Don't know if that's the best policy, but that's the way Mickey sees it, and that's how he plays it out in his own style of tough love. So in a way, through Rocky, like I said, he's continuing his fight. His boxing days are definitely over, but if through Rocky he can get some success, well, then maybe that'll help make sense of his previous years in his life. Now, there's other characters, and this is one I really liked. Very important character, Pauley. In addition to being Adrian's sister, he really represents the animal instinct. He's drunk a lot of the time, very obnoxious, completely unfiltered, no boundaries. He'll just shoot from the hip, say what he wants to say, usually flies off at the handle. And, most of the times, though, even though he says something harsh, and it's like, oh, God, Pauley, why'd you do that? Pauley, come on. We're cringing, going, dude, don't do that. His outrages and the chaos that he brings to a scene ends up really helping out the characters in some way. It's the trickster. It's the animal. We know this in Toto. When Toto runs off in The Wizard of Oz, we'll get to that later in the course. But it's kind of like, oh, don't do that. And then it's like, oh, well, it's a good thing he did. So he's the trickster. He's kind of an opponent, but he ends up helping in some way. And this animal theme really gets played out a lot. I mean, he works in a meat freezer, and then later on, Rocky's punching the ribs of the cows, as he's working out. You see this picture here. He's even holding a piece of a dead animal while he's talking. His sister Adrian works in a pet store. Rocky later on gets this dog, Butkus. He eats raw chicken eggs. And this whole animal essence really seems to carry throughout the whole film. And, why not? I mean, boxing in a way for a human being, it's really kind of an animal thing to do. Although I don't know too many animals that actually beat each other's faces in, unless they're, I guess, proving their strength and their virility for the if it's a pack of wolves or something like that, maybe they'll get into a mock fight or something to see who's top dog. But really, other than that, these are human beings pounding each other in the head in a boxing ring. So this animal theme really plays out through it, and it's very important because this is the contrast with the tenderness that we see between Rocky and Adrian, and even just Rocky in his own inner self has this tenderness, this very human, this very loving, caring aspect to him, his heart, that somehow lives and survives in this world that is really animalistic and gritty and down and dirty. So this is Pauley, and we'll see as you watch the movie how his actions, disruptive as they are, really oftentimes lead towards where the story and the characters need to go. So that's Pauley. Now, here's Gazzo. He's this loan shark that Rocky works for. If somebody doesn't pay their loans, Rocky goes and breaks their knees or their thumbs or something like that. Not a good job. But again, this is the world Rocky lives in. But Gazzo is kind of supportive of Rocky. Tells him to quit smoking when he's training for the big fight. He gives him a little bit of money to take Adrian out on a date. So he's kind of an opponent because he represents the bad side, the other side of the tracks where Rocky lives. But he's got a good side too. So that's Gazzo. And another character, we have Jergens. He is the promoter of this boxing extravaganza, very much a businessman. He's interested in filling seats and putting on a good show. As a matter of fact, that's what he tells Rocky. He goes, "I'm sure you'll put on a great show." It's all about show business. And, of course, Rocky is nothing about business or show. He's playing for keeps. All right, so that's Jergens. Now we have the actual opponent in the boxing ring, Apollo Creed. He is a champion in every sense of the word. Rocky really respects him. But he's also a showman. And you got to remember that this is 1976. Muhammad Ali was a world boxing champion. Well, I guess it kind of went back and forth with Frazier and some of these other fights. But boxing, the heavyweight boxing titles were hugely popular entertainment in the 70s. Between Ali and the newscaster Howard Cosell. Very, very popular, huge ratings. Everybody wanted to know and watch these fights. I guess UFC is popular now, but 40 years ago, this was a thing. And we had a black champion in Muhammad Ali and other ones since. And Apollo, in addition to being a showman and a businessman and a champion, he's got a heart too, and he believes in the underdog. And he rants on a lot about 1976 and 1776. He dresses up as George Washington and Uncle Sam as he enters the ring in the final showdown. And one of the things he talks about when they start arranging this fight is that he wants to give a Snow White underdog a shot. Now, I don't think this is a racial slur in that sense, although it is. And that's something interesting to look at 40 years ago in this movie and maybe in the consciousness of the country, that a black man, a black champion, giving a white underdog a shot, an opportunity shot at the American dream, made sense. That's fine. I don't know. Things have maybe changed since then. I know there seems to be an undercurrent with racial relations and tensions in this country now. And maybe we had a little bit better together 40 years ago. I don't know. Maybe that's something you can look at or just consider when you see the movie. It wasn't really thought of being much back then. It really made sense in the context of how the world viewed boxing at the time and race, and with this movie. So that's Apollo. Now, he's the opponent in the ring, but in a lot of ways, he's also an ally too. I mean, by giving him the shot, giving him Rocky the dream shot at the title, this is an opportunity then for Rocky to prove himself, not as a boxer, but as somebody who can go the distance. And that's very necessary as part of Rocky's growth and unfoldment. So, opponent in the ring, yes, but in the larger picture, he's really there to help Rocky, as is everybody, even the ones that disagree with him. Okay, now we're going to break this story down with a timeline and talk about the hero's journey when I'm done with this. But to finish up, in the middle of the initiation, a little bit past the middle of the initiation phase, middle of Act 2, this is actually very much at the end of Act 2, right before the night before the match. We have this soliloquy. Normally that's an alone, a solo speaking, like to be or not to be from Shakespeare, where the main character is just kind of off somewhere and they're talking. Usually that works better in theater. Much of the time in movies, it's just somebody looking off in the distance, contemplating, who they are and why they are, what are they going to do next? This moment of alone. A lot of times it's a moment of truth. And we see this. Rocky can't sleep the night before the match, and he walks down to the stadium and he sees the promoter, Jergens, and he noticed there's these giant posters, banners hanging up in the arena, one of Apollo and one of Rocky. And Rocky sees the one of him, and it's got him wearing red shorts with white stripes or white trim. And he tells Jergens, he says, the shorts are wrong. It's, they're supposed to be white trunks with a red stripe. And Jergens goes, it doesn't matter, does it? I'm sure you'll put on a great show. So that's, Rocky at this point realizes that he's in too deep. He's in to a bigger thing, and he's not about the show. He doesn't care about the show. He's in it for life. This is his life that he's going up against, not some, promoter with ratings and ticket sales to be worried about. So he leaves the arena and goes back to Adrian and sits on the edge of the bed, and he tells her, he goes, I can't do it. I can't beat him. And it's very interesting what Adrian says. She goes, Apollo? Like, who else? I mean, who else is he fighting the next day? I mean, of course Apollo, but really? Of course Apollo? Maybe she knows a little more about what's going on. Maybe she realizes that what Rocky is fighting, what he's going up against, is the enemy within, this demon in his mind, this opponent in his heart that he has to overcome, that he has to face, fight, and overcome. So maybe she's a little sensitive and a little tuned into that too. And, and this is where he says what he needs to say. And he says, I can't beat him. I just have to go the distance. So now the whole meaning behind the boxing match, where this inner story and the outer stories are coming together. Now we see that for Rocky to survive and to live in the world and in his own skin, he has to go the distance in the boxing ring with Apollo, because that's really what he's fighting. These inner and outer stories have now become one, and they'll all play out the next day at the arena with the boxing match. Now, just a footnote to this, another character trait about Rocky is his attention to detail. Now, I've wondered about this. in the beginning, he talks to Adrian about, well, the turtle food and there's flies and the turtle chokes on the moths because this one brand has more moths and flies in the food. And you think, okay, what a weird thing to say. Maybe he's just trying to pick up a girl. And, but he notices things like that. And, as I just mentioned about that scene, the night before, the match in the, ring, or at the arena where he sees the poster with the red shorts, and he corrects it. But so he notices things like that. And, is that really important? Well, it is to him. So I thought about that and I thought, well, maybe that is something that's an important thing for a boxer. I would imagine sizing up I'm not a boxer, but I imagine sizing up your opponent. And, well, if they're favoring one leg or if, they're, covering, one side of their ribs or shifting to one side for some reason. Maybe they can't see out of one of their eyes. You really need to notice these things and on the fly. So this attention to detail would be important to a boxer. We don't think of Rocky as being a nitpicky, detail-oriented guy. We've seen his apartment. It's, and definitely needed a lady's touch, which he finally got. But this attention to detail actually plays out all the way to the end. And this is where it finally made sense to me. At the end of the boxing match, he's, all bloody. He's all beat up. He, his eyes all puffed up, can't see a thing. And he's, Adrian. He was calling out to her and she's like, Rocky. And she tries to run through the crowd and she does. And as she does, her hat falls off. Turns around, looks, and just keeps on going. And she pulls herself up into the ring. And the first thing he says to her is, hey, where'd your hat go? What happened to your hat? Why, not hello, how are you? Hey, I made it through the ring. I'm still alive. Where's your hat? He couldn't even see out of his eye. And he noticed that she lost her hat on the way in. So that's his attention to detail. And in this ending sequence, it's not just detail attention. He pays attention to what a woman is wearing. So guys, take note. Girls tend to like that if you notice things. So Rocky does. And to me, when he first thing he says, what happened to your hat? That means he's paying attention. Mine wasn't entirely focused on the match, at least at the beginning, beforehand when he saw her wearing the hat. He knew that, and he knew she didn't have her hat then. So that is, a little teeny line, kind of a throwaway thing. You almost don't even hear it, but I think it's wonderful. So that's a little background story of the characters and how they play out, how they interplay with each other on Rocky. Now we're going to shift and go on to the timeline and see how these characters and these archetypal events play out with the hero's journey in the story of Rocky. Okay, so now we're taking a look at the timeline of the story for Rocky, and we have brought in departure, initiation, and return, our three major sections of the hero's journey. We will put these up here and put some marks here, and we'll put a nice little midpoint right there in the middle. And, well, first of all, the first thing that happens, the very first scene, is a boxing match. Okay, now I said this is not a boxing movie, but the very first thing we see is Rocky boxing. Well, because he's a boxer. The movie is not about boxing, it's about Rocky, and he just happens to be a boxer. So that's the first thing we see him do. It's a seedy boxing ring in Philadelphia, and people smoking and betting, and very, very far apart from this ending section. As a matter of fact, the whole return, this whole Act 3, is in the boxing ring with Apollo. That's the whole third act. So there is boxing in it. There's a lot of boxing in it, especially at the end. But all throughout, it's really a story of Rocky, and mostly his inner story on how he's boxing with himself, so to speak. Okay, so if we take a look now at the hero's journey, of course we know from the departure, there's usually a call to adventure. Okay, so there's the call. But who gets the call? Okay. Now, if this were a boxing movie, the call to adventure would be oh, Rocky gets a shot at the title. Well, he does, and it happens kind of in between the departure and initiation, this Act 1 turning point here. But he doesn't get the call, okay? So Apollo is looking for a boxer, as well as a promoter, to do this boxing event. And he looks through different catalogs, and he sees Rocky. And he wants the Italian Stallion to be his opponent for this heavyweight title, this great show that they're all going to put on. But Rocky doesn't get the memo, okay? He doesn't get the message until about another 20 minutes. It's almost at the midpoint here, where he finds out about the fight. So that's a lot of screen time where we know, and some of the characters know about this fight, but Rocky doesn't know. So that's not really his call to adventure. So he didn't really get that call. So whose call is it? What's going on? Well, I think we need to take a look at Adrian, okay? And this is, of course, the love story, the love interest. She works at the pet store next to the boxing ring, which isn't far from where Rocky lives. And he tries a couple times to get her to go out with him, very early on, actually not that far long after the first boxing match. He goes over to the pet store and tries to talk to her. She's not really responsive. So this is the first time. He comes back again and tries a second time. Well, no. So she's not answering the call. Even though it's Rocky, it's not called Adrian, but she's not answering the call. And finally, the third time, through Pauley, okay, Adrian's brother, who is also a friend of Rocky's, Pauley says, well, okay, why don't you come over to our house, because they live together, for Thanksgiving, okay? And then she can see you, and you get to go out with my sister. Okay, great. Well, Thanksgiving's about here. So it was arranged. It was set up. So third time, okay, they're finally going to get to go out. What we don't know is that Adrian doesn't know about this arrangement yet, but that's okay. Okay, so what else is going on in the boxing world? Let's look up here. At this point, Mickey, we get to know Mickey, his manager, and he runs the boxing gym where Rocky works out. He kicks Rocky out of his locker, calls him a bum, all this stuff. Okay, great. Then from there, we see Gazzo, which is Rocky's boss, his underworld boss, this lone shark, and Rocky goes out and breaks people's thumbs. So this is all going on in the outer story, okay? But what's really going on the inside, and that's why we're having it at the bottom, and I'll just make a note here that this is the inner story, and it really has so much to do with Adrian, the love interest, and that's really more of an inner thing than it is an outer thing, although of course she lives in the outside world as well. She's really representative of the inner world, and particularly Rocky's inner world, his heart. And he is very much smitten with her, wants to go out with her. She does not match his advances until she kind of gets forced into it. Now, as far as that goes, they come over for Thanksgiving, Rocky does, here at this point. And what happens with Pauley? Pauley is the trickster. He ends up getting crazy and he kicks them out, which seems kind of like a bad thing at first, but it really isn't, because then they get to go on their first date. And it's good that they did it away from there, because they're away from Pauley, and they get this really nice time at the skating rink. And finally, about this point, Rocky finds out about Apollo and the boxing match. And he hesitates at first, kind of refuses the call, agrees to do it. And let me just mention that on this date, or after this date, there's another scene with them, and after the skating rink, and they go over to his house, and he invites her in. She refuses, at first, finally comes in, and they have a night together. So things start out very slow with the love story, but then they pick up as we get more towards the halfway point, this midpoint. And it is right at this midpoint where we see both of them coming together. Okay, so this is where Rocky finds out about the match. And then we have the love match that's taking place inside with Adrian. Okay, so they're very parallel at this point of no return, where now Rocky and Adrian have crossed the line, and they're dating now, and Rocky's boxing life has now reached critical mass to where now he has to face the world champion in the ring. But we know this isn't about that. This is about his inner story and whether or not Rocky feels he's a bum and how we can go about that. So things move along very quickly. There's a really great scene here with Mickey. And I don't know if this is inner or outer story. It's probably more inner, where Mickey comes to his apartment and they have this really long scene, very heated about whether or not Mickey should be Rocky's manager, even whether or not he needs one for this bout. So they actually match too. At the end of the scene, there's a lot of arguing. There's a lot of yes, a lot of no. And finally, Rocky goes after Mickey after he storms out and says, okay. We don't really hear that because it's far away, but they shake hands. So now Rocky and Adrian are linked up. Rocky and Mickey are connected. So we have this posse together. Rocky is a little more complete. He's got a mentor and he has a love interest. And now he feels like he can really get to this fight that's ahead of him. So there's some training happening. There's a couple training where he's running through the city and all that. And there's even more with Pauley. Pauley comes through again in his own bizarro way. Pauley here, Pauley comes over here, and more arguing. But the end result is that Adrian moves in with Rocky. It's about here maybe, that Adrian moves in. So the inner story is intensifying. The outer story is intensifying. There's the training. There's the scene where he's on TV punching the cow ribs. So he's getting some attention from the community. He's making some progress in his training. He was kind of hacking and wheezing at his first run, and by now he's doing much better. And then finally, there's this final training run, which is actually more in the outer world because he's training for the boxing. And this is the classic, iconic, the fight songs going, the Rocky theme, and he's running up the stairs and gonna fly now and all this stuff. And he's done. He's ready. He's prepared his body, the outer world, about everything he can do, and he is ready to go, or so we think. Now, we have here, and we remember from our hero's journey in this initiation part, there's also the appointment with death. Now, we're not talking about an actual physical death, but we are talking about the death of the dream, or the death of the goal, or the perceived death of the goal, that this is over. And there is this point here, we're going to draw an arrow here, where we have this moment before. It's the night before the boxing match, and this is where Rocky has his moment in the ring. He goes down to the ring, can't sleep, goes down to the ring, sees what's going on, sees what's ahead of him. It's all too much. And then he says, I can't beat him. And he knows then that this isn't about boxing, if he doesn't know already. This is about going the distance. Okay. And it means going the distance in both the inner and the outer story. So going the distance means going the distance in the ring with Apollo. But really, for Rocky, it's about going the distance in his life. So if he can go the distance with Apollo in the ring, somehow that will prove to himself that he's not just a bum from the neighborhood, that he actually is somebody, that this potential, this diamond in the rough, has been revealed. It has reached its fulfillment in his life. And he knows that that's what he's up against. So he's really fighting his own inner shadow throughout this whole thing. Earlier on, long before he gets to Apollo, his shadow world is his environment, the crappy neighborhood, working for a mobster, a two-bit boxing promoter or a manager, Mickey, who really isn't much help. As a matter of fact, he really kind of is a thorn in his side. So in Pauley and all these things he's going up against on the outside, so he's constantly fighting his environment, who he is and where he's from. What he has to face every day. But now he has this opportunity where the inner and the outer worlds collide and combine. A lot of times it usually is here at this appointment with death. And that's really the death of what he can't do, or his doubts or his fears. He has to let all that go. He has to put all that behind him and put everything he has into this fight. Again, not fighting Apollo, fighting his own shadow self. And if he can go the distance, that's winning. And he doesn't win the match. He does not win the fight, but he does go the distance. And that is victory for him. Makes you wonder, what if Rocky had knocked out Apollo in the third round? Well, okay, he's champion now. He would have won the fight, literally, in the outer story. But would he have gone the distance? Different thing, different fight. And I am maybe sure that it would have had a different outcome, that he wouldn't have been tested to go the distance if it were a much shorter fight, even if he won. Point is, he went the distance, didn't win, but in doing so was very much victorious. So as we can see, this is really an inner story about Rocky's struggles, and the person he is fighting is the person in the mirror, not the person in the ring, and he wins. So this is Rocky in the timeline. I hope this helps, and we're bringing in things we've talked about before with the hero's journey and how this plays out. So that's Rocky.